All right, Brad, we are back on Thompson to Clark. And I think the main topic of discussion today is whether or not you can still take the Giants seriously as playoff contenders. And we're going to get to that. They have fallen off. We had talked about this a couple weeks ago about this road trip that they were going to have and this bunch of series against good teams and how they were going to have to split these games, and they're losing 2 out of every 3 against these teams. And as you know, it's just math. They are now sitting on the outside of the wild card race here. They are in the 4th spot, and only 3 teams get in. So we'll talk about that. But before that, they have sort of like one last ditch hope here, and it is the health of Mike Yastrzemski, Mitch Haniger, John Brebbia, and to an extent, Ross Stripling. Now, we thought it was possible that Yaz and Haniger were going to be available today. That is not the case. I think the goal is still to try to get both of those guys back before the series with the Reds, the home series that they're playing starting tonight. Do you think is that a kick in the butt for them, getting those guys back? You are going to have to send some of your youth back, probably an Elliot Ramos, possibly a Matos, possibly a Meckler, who we have just decided to call Spexler.
Spexler, the Mech.
I made a comment on Twitter. I was like, who Meckler reminds me of is Dan Gladden from the 1984-1985 Giants. And our buddies from Giants Cocktail, the podcast, we've had both of those guys on. They said, yeah, we agree, but all that means is that we're old enough to know and see Dan Gladden. And I was like, yep, exactly right.
Yes.
Anybody who's younger than 45 has no idea who Dan Gladden is, at least for the Giants.
No.
You saw him on the Twins.
You might know him as a twin. That's a possibility. Some of the guys who are a little bit younger than us are going to know him from the 1991 World Champion Twins, right? Somewhere around there.
Yep.
Now I can't even think of when the Twins won it. It was 91, right?
I think it was 91. That's pretty famous 91. World Series.
Yeah. That was a huge one. That was kind of Atlanta's first foray into being good again. And so that was kind of fun. Kind of kicked off the whole thing. Our buddy Harveen, who's a Braves fan though, he had to wait all the way until, what was it, 95 for the Braves to win a World Series, and they were good all of those years, and that was it. Then they kept running into the Yankees, and they run into the Twins. So yeah, the tough luck Braves of the early 90s. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. It was another frustrating week. It was another week of like, why am I subjecting myself to watching this stuff? But we do it because we're Giants fans.
Oh yeah,
and we just love baseball in general. So I mean,
to be fair,
yeah,
one of the really good things that I like about this podcast is, there are times when you just want to clock out of the Giants. These last couple weeks, I do,
just so you know.
I'm sure fans are like, look, this is giving me too much pain. But because you and I have to talk about it, we're at least, if we're not watching all of the games, we're, watching the alerts, we're checking in, we're watching highlights, just because we have to talk about it. And that is, it's somewhat a gift and a curse to doing a podcast. A gift in that, you're staying alert, you're knowing the ins and outs of the team, and we just talked about all these guys coming back. Like, we're watching this stuff actively, but on the negative, like, our feelings just keep getting hurt.
Not only our feelings, I just feel like everything's getting hurt. Every time I watch this team and they lose 10-2 to the Braves, I'm just like, come on, man. But yeah, it's I don't know. They're on the cusp of kind of ducking out here. But they're also on the cusp of coming back and getting right back into it. And I think these players are going to help. I think Yaz is going to help. I think Haniger is going to help. But the problem is you've got guys like Meckler and Matos and Ramos who can have good at bats and have had a lot of at bats over the past month or so. And then you got Yaz and Haniger who just haven't. So they need to kind of get back up to speed. Can you afford to plug both of those guys into the lineup at the same time and say, hey, boys, I know you've been out for a while, but go at it, get it quality ABs and get on base.
And don't pull your hamstring, Yaz, while we're at it.
Don't do that. I mean,
if Yaz pulls his hamstring again, then Conforto just comes in from his hamstring pull and replaces Yaz's bad hamstring.
Yeah, so collectively you've got two hamstrings between the two guys, right? Isn't that how it works? Science, biology, I've got it all. Yeah. I mean, because you go all the way back to when Yaz first hurt his hamstring, and it was in Mexico City. And remember how long ago Mexico City was? I think that was before the summer. That's how long it's been. And then off and on since then. So to think he's going to come back fully healthy and be that guy again, I don't know, man. I mean, he can crush right-handed hitting. We know that. When he's hot, that's the only problem though. When he's not hot, he has trouble. And he's a guy also that, kind of before the injury, he was one of the few guys you'd see in the lineup against lefties and righties because of his defense. Now with a bulky hamstring, unless it's 100%, is it going to be worth it? So maybe we just see him in against righties. There's going to be still a lot of platooning going on with Yaz that we haven't seen in the past. Brebbia, great guy to have as an opener, great guy to have in the back end of the bullpen. Now, if you get him in as an opener, can then you take Ryan Walker and can you shove him into the back end of the bullpen and kind of solidify the back end of the bullpen too in some of these tougher games like we had yesterday, the Sunday game, the ESPN game against Atlanta, where that was just a back and forth contest. The Giants ended up pulling that one off. What was it? 8-5, right? They only ended up scoring 5. And you could use guys like that in the back end of the bullpen, especially with the stretch coming up. So being able to push Ryan Walker, I think, to like the 7th and 8th inning, because he is nasty. I mean, when you watch him as an opener, I just feel like I watch him and I know that there aren't many other options. And I look and I see and I go, man, that kind of just seems so wasted. Like that's a good 8th inning or 9th inning arm, especially against right-handers. If he comes in the 8th inning, you've got 3 right-handers against him. He throws those Frisbee discs up there, man, and he's untouchable. But then the other day, he was a starter or opener on Saturday, and he starts messing around with left-handers. And instead of throwing the slider, like a back foot slider at him, he starts throwing fastballs, like up and away fastballs. And then against another right-hander, he threw a couple of fastballs and didn't even throw the slider, and he got hit. So he gave up a run in the first. Again, not that big of a deal, but he's a guy I think would excel in the back. And so having Brebbia back, I think would help that quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. So looking back at yesterday's game, it was almost necessary. We had the Phillies in Philadelphia lose that middle game, which was winnable, do get out of there with a victory, so he didn't get swept. Then Atlanta comes into town, and my takeaway from the Atlanta Braves is the Atlanta Braves are just head and shoulders above who the Giants are as a baseball team. And they may be the best baseball team in all of baseball, whether it's them, whether it's the Dodgers, there are I would say 3 or 4 teams that are kind of head and shoulders above the rest. And then there's that next tier. And then the Giants may be in like the 3rd tier, but kind of just still creeping and never say die kind of team. Thairo Strada, of all people, was kind of the inspirational voice in getting them over that hump yesterday, according to the stories and according to his teammates. And I thought that was really interesting because you don't think of Tyro necessarily as like this longtime vet, been wearing the colors for all these years, but he has been with the team for a few years now. And, for the first 2 or 3 months of the season was probably the best player on their team. So it was great to see him. He has that safety squeeze bunt. He's making plays. And he kind of now fits that role of the one guy you kind of depend on in that lineup, to have tough at bats, to be, we just see these just horrible ABs sometimes. And, you want that one stable guy, and he doesn't get pulled against righties. He's got to play the entire game. He's got to start, pretty much every game. So that is a good guy to have in that role. And hopefully he can bring more of that because I think they need it. But you also, at the same time, you got 32 games left in this season.
Right.
The fact that Tyro had to do this speech in game 130, where it's like,
yeah,
I was like, all right, a little bit early, but hey, any which way you can do it. And I was happy to see that they took to that. And still, I saw the lineup that they rolled out, or at least the lineup card that they showed today. And I'm just like, it just doesn't match up against some of these other teams. And they win on the margins and by the hair of their chins and by doing things like yesterday, but they're not a lineup that necessarily scares anybody, I don't think.
No, and definitely not, but they do the key things. I mean, and that's what's keeping them above 500. The fact that they, get the key double play yesterday, that could have been an absolute disaster. You had somebody not covering first base. I can't remember who it was now. I'm trying to think. The pitcher who was trying to cover first base took the ground ball throw and then tossed it over to Estrada. Estrada looks towards home real quick, throws to Bailey, gets the double play. And we get out of it, and that's fantastic. But it could have been a disaster, and things kind of fall the way for the Giants. And when they do, that's how this team wins. It's not like the Atlanta Braves where you've got everybody in the lineup who hits 20 home runs. So if you make a mistake on the bases for the Giants, it is paramount. If you make a mistake on the bases and you're the Braves, that's all right. We'll hit back-to-back home runs. We'll score 2 runs. We'll make up for it. And by the way, we'll also score the most runs almost in Major League history in the first inning in a season. We're going to go ahead and do that too. We're going to put pressure on you. And the Giants did that last night. They kind of turned the tables a little bit, and they put pressure on the Braves by, Tristan Beck going out there and having a fantastic first 3 innings and just shutting down the Braves. And the Giants were able to put a couple on the board and make it 2-0. Of course, the Braves come back because that's what they do. They're a team that hits. But the Giants, I mean, we talk about it all season long. This is a team that has to minimize mistakes. They have to, when they get on base and they get a runner in scoring position, they've got to find a way to get that run home. And all of August, it just hasn't been that way. And I'd say pretty much almost all of July as well, as soon as the All-Star break was over. So it's, and again, they're going into another stretch right now where they have to play almost mistake-free baseball, because if they're going to try to climb back into a wild card spot, they have to play their best baseball. They can make a mistake here and there because they can make up for it. They're not, they're not a doldrums team like the A's, who just, they go down 3-0 and that's it. For the Giants, we go down 3-0 and we think, lately that's kind of it, but we've seen a little bit of spark and a little bit of life, and then getting some power back again, getting some Haniger, getting some Yaz back in the lineup with a little bit of power, I think it's going to help.
And I think that's the difference in this team and maybe even the team from 2 years ago, because when we watched how hard they had to claw to get those runs, And then in the blink of an eye, the Braves just can hit a home run and they just get all of it back. And
Yeah.
that is what this team is missing. They don't hit the 2-run homer. They don't hit the 3-run homer. They score, and when they do score and when they do hit with runners on base, you're like, wow, like where has that been all year? And then the Braves can just go, oh, like don't get too happy with yourselves because we're just gonna hit a jack and we're gonna be right back in it, and it's gonna be so deflating for you because you know that the only way you're scoring runs is you have to claw and scratch again. And so, hopefully maybe Yaz, maybe Haniger can bring a little bit of that. Haniger had been disappointing before that. And, is this crazy to me? Like all you had to do was throw a fastball above his hands and he was swinging through it.
Yeah.
And, it's easy for me to sit on my couch and see that and say that and then go, does the hitting coach see that? Like he's got to see that all you got to do is put the ball right there and he's not touching it. And of course they see that and they're working on it throughout the entire season and they're trying to figure it out. So hopefully he comes back and they fix whatever that flaw was. But that would be, I think, the punch, the puncher's chance for them is Haniger comes back, he hits for power. Yaz comes back and he gets hot. And then because what happens is that, now maybe Jock gets another pitch or two that's decent instead of, kind of getting pitched around because he's really the only guy you're worried about from the left-handed side. And then, Wilmer's been hot. Stay hot, Wilmer. I know it's painful to be running those bases all the time. So, hey, that's what happens when you got over 1,000 OPS. You're on base, buddy. And
but again, over the last week, he only hit like 170.
Yeah.
But he still hit 2 home runs. So that's the thing. He is still running into things.
Yeah.
And that brings up another point, too. I mean, the Braves also have speed up and down their lineup. And they run the bases really well. We get into a situation where Wilmer hits a double, next guy hits a single, and you don't know for sure that he's going to score. He might get held up at third base. And there's one out before that single was hit. And now you've got one out to try to get him home at that point. And that just kind of puts a lot of pressure on the lineup too. That's why having guys like Matos and Meckler in the lineup help, but you're going to lose that when you bring back Yaz and Haniger. You're going to gain some power, but you're going to lose. We saw what the speed of Meckler can do on that double play. A diving catch in the outfield and then throw to first base to get the double play. Meckler was able to tag up and score before the second out was made. And you and I both, I could have sworn that rule was that was considered a force out. I always thought for some reason that's considered a force out, but it's not because he's, the runner had already left the base, was coming back to the base.
Who was it? DeYoung was the goofball on.
It was DeYoung. Yeah, it was DeYoung, and so but again, he had already had like 4 RBI that game.
Yeah. We decided that we're calling him Ding Dong DeYoung, not only for his ability to hit the long ball, to hit the ding dongs, but also to be a ding dong on the bases, man.
That was a little bit of a rough thing to watch. But again, the speed of Meckler. So you have Wilmer Flores at third base. That's not happening. So to have that speed in the lineup and also have the awareness, the base running awareness to know, you've got to touch that plate before that ball is caught over at first base. So, a little injection of youth there. You see it now and then.
Matos yesterday with that double stretch the base hit double. Stuff like that is helpful. It's just a little bit inconsistent. You would like to see it more, and that's kind of the struggle with young players. Is just
and you've got a lot of youth in the lineup sometimes too. So and that's a bit of the problem. If you have the inconsistency and youth, and they're taking up like 5 lineup spots, then you run into okay, are we kind of rebuilding here? I know we're fighting for a playoff spot, but would we rather see these guys just play every day?
Yeah.
Or would we rather just kind of, plug the healthy guys back in when they're back and keep fighting for that spot? And I think the obvious answer is you want to keep fighting for that spot. You get in the playoffs, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you can get some playoff games at home, then you get the fans excited, fill the stadium, and it's awesome for everybody. And it's October baseball. I mean, you can't go wrong with October baseball. So
no. And the Giants are slightly better at home, 36-30 versus 31-33 on the road. Not a ton better, but still a little bit better. And I think Hot Take Bry and JJ are going to the game tomorrow night. So
nice.
Tuesday night we're supposed to go Harry Potter night.
That's right.
Get to see Ellie. Unfortunately, Kyle Harrison is pitching Monday night right before we're recording right before the game, so we won't get to see Kyle, but still, and who knows, maybe Yaz and Haniger come back on Tuesday. We'll get to see the return of both of those guys, so
yeah,
that'll be fun. I haven't been to a game since, let's see, I went to a couple games. When was it? In July. I'd gone like almost back to back, like on a Thursday and then on a Sunday. So my third time in the park this season. So hopefully it'll be a good game. All right, let's talk about the player of the week.
Yeah, so this was kind of a tough week because there were a lot of platoons this week, and when there's a lot of platoons, you don't have a lot of at bats. So the two hitters I have in the poll this week, of the three players, I have two hitters and one pitcher. Neither one of them really got more than, I think it's 12 at bats on the week, or 16, maybe 16 at bats on the week. Usually I try to look and I'll pick the guys who have like 22 to 23 at bats, somewhere in there. But we didn't have that this week. A lesser number to choose from. But coming in last with no votes, which I was kind of shocked, Kyle Harrison made his major league debut, 3 1/3 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, and it was all on the 2-run home run by Bryce the Flow Harper, and then 1 walk and 5 strikeouts in 3 1/3. So excited to see what he does tonight. And if you're listening to this, it's already going to have happened. But I want to see like 7 or 8 strikeouts tonight. I want to see him try to get through 5. I think that would be pretty awesome.
He's going to be pretty pumped. I wonder if he even throws a little bit harder than that 97 that we saw in Philadelphia.
There's a very good chance he overthrows in the first inning, but we'll see. Him against Ellie De La Cruz, that's going to be exciting too. Coming in second place, Austin Slater with 25% of the vote. WRC plus of 254, 500 average, 3 runs, 2 ribs, 27% walk rate, which is huge. And then coming in first is the Specs, Wade Meckler, 229 WRC plus, 500 average, 4 runs scored, 1 RBI, 19% walk rate. And like we were talking about earlier, had that super heads up play on the bases where he was able to score before the double play. And just all around kind of some heads up base running, showing off the speed. Once he gets on base, he can show off the speed, and he was getting on base with a 500.
That's why I voted for him. It was just,
yeah.
When you see the head first slides, when you see him scoring on plays that, other guys on the team who don't have his aggressiveness or his speed, that means something. Like, that's an edge that they can use, and they need more people like that. If they had another Meckler in the lineup who could stretch a single into a double or score from second on a base hit, you're getting that little extra, from the team. So, I mean, it's also possible that he could go back down, which will be an interesting thing. Is it Matos or is it Meckler that goes back down? Do they want the righty? Do they want the lefty? I think is probably going to be one of the factors. Also, the fact that Meckler can play center probably helps his chances as well. Matos can play center too, but they probably feel that Meckler's more of a natural center fielder than Matos might be a better left fielder. So that all that's, I'm obviously a fan of both guys. So.
I think it's going to be whoever is not further along from their injury rehab between Haniger and Yaz. Somebody they want to sit against the opposite or against the same handed pitcher. So Haniger, you want to probably sit him against righties. Yaz, you want to sit him against lefties. But one of them is going to have to play. They're going to have to kind of mix and match. Although we're going to see Jock Peterson in the outfield again, and so it's going to be they're going to want to keep one of the guys up to at least kind of spell either Yaz or Haniger, because I kind of feel like it's a rush job at this point. I know Yaz with the hamstring, but I mean, if he's healthy, he's healthy. He's going to come back and he's going to play. They don't want him to get injured more. But you get to a point where it's like, okay, is he going to go on the 60-day IL? And I know Haniger has had a rehab assignment down in Sacramento. I don't know if Yaz has had a rehab assignment. Has he?
I didn't hear. I heard Haniger.
Right.
And I heard Brebbia is about to start his, but I did not hear anything about Yaz.
Yeah, I don't think Yaz actually had one. So his rehab assignment might be up in the majors. So we'll see.
All right, let's talk about the adult beverage that we are both having. I'm watching you sip what you're sipping, which looks fantastic. What are you drinking?
It's brown, so which is always good.
Yeah.
I went with the Major League Baseball sponsor because we're heading into
let's go.
We're heading into playoff crunch
September.
time.
It's almost September.
All of these games that we're playing now are basically playoff games.
Yep.
And if they're treated any differently with 32 games, 31 games left now, if they're treated any differently, then you might as well just sit out the rest of the season, because this is crunch time. So I went with the Evan Williams. I did a big pour tonight. Usually I always thought a double was 2 ounces. And I think I figured out today that a double is 2.5 ounces.
Oh, wow.
So I was like,
so a shot is actually 1 1/4.
1.5 is a shot, and a double is 2.5. I'm going to look that up though, because I'm not sure,
Yeah, you got to figure that out, because it's going to help our health as we do this show.
That's true. It's gonna help our health, depending on how the Giants play. So that's also
it's funny. Crystal's brother had a birthday today, and I just assume that everyone's kind of in the ballpark of our age, just because everyone is kind of around the same age as you.
Yeah.
And so I asked her, I was like, how old is Dan? She's like 35. And so I texted him and I was like, happy birthday, you lucky dog. I'm so jealous. Crystal just told me you're only 35. Oh my God. So
oh man.
He's got he could hit the drinks a little harder than we can these days.
Oh, for sure. Let's see, 35. That was 15 years ago. I got to do math here. Is that 2008? Good Lord. And I should know, but 2008, that's when my second was born.
Yeah,
and she turns 15 this year. So I remember 35. Oh, good Lord.
Oh, so I have a quick story on. I'd mentioned that for my birthday, Crystal had purchased the. I think it's for my birthday. It's either my birthday or Father's Day. I think it's my birthday. She purchased the Scotch subscription service. And so got the first bottle. I was like, oh, this is cool. I've never seen this before. And then so it's like every month, I think they were going to send me one. And so then I get the second bottle for month number 2. And I was like, oh, it's the same exact bottle, which is great. Like, it's really good. But I did kind of want the variety to see, what else is out there. So I told her
that's not in the spirit of having a Scotch club. Yeah.
So I told her, I said, hey, they sent me the same one. And she's like, okay, I'm going to write these people an email. Writes him an email. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me send you the little stickers so you can send it back. And I'll make a note and make sure so that when the third bottle comes that, they'll have it figured out. So like, okay, great. Third bottle comes. It's the same one. Again.
No.
So she
What
emails
is
them again.
happening?
They're so embarrassed. What we've sort of gathered is it's probably not a very well run operation. It's probably a very early in the ball game. They're kind of trying to figure
Yeah.
things out. So, they're so sad. We'll send you two, and then you can send us the other ones back. So finally today, I did get the second and third bottles. Now
Oh, nice.
they're not exactly the same bottles, but they're like kissing cousins. Like
Okay.
they're the same. They're from the same brand,
So
and
they have a contract with a brand,
one is like
probably.
the
Mhm.
anniversary edition, and the other one is like whatever. So it's like okay, whatever, it's fine
Yeah.
because it's just I'm okay with it. But Crystal's like, I'm gonna wait to send those other bottles back because who knows if they even know? Like, how are they even tracking that? Like, we may just have 5 instead of the 3, and then we're done with
You've
it.
already
So,
paid for it, so.
yes, we'll see. We'll see what happens if they keep bothering us. But
Well,
uh,
save one for when I come down there.
oh yeah, no, I may just I may just send one for if they
Oh,
don't
you don't
bug
have to
us.
do
I may
that. No,
just
no,
send
no.
you
You
one.
wait. No, it gives me an excuse to get down there, and then we can go to a game.
See the hook to get down here was when your oldest, you're like, hey, I went to this school, San Jose State. Are you
Yes.
interested at all?
I
Let's go walk
tried.
the campus.
I tried, man. But we're still, so okay, so we are working on a spring break trip
Okay.
for next year where we're going to go to maybe Chico, Humboldt.
Mm-hmm.
But see, now if we start in San Jose at San Jose State and stay at Santana Row,
Oh,
she likes that vibe. That
yeah. No,
Santana Row vibe
it's a
might be
cool
kind of
vibe.
her thing.
It's
And
a
then
cool
Valley
vibe.
Fair, right? I don't know if it's
Yeah,
called Valley Fair Mall anymore,
yeah. It's
but
still called Valley Fair.
yeah, so all of that,
The
and then
other
we head
vibe
north.
the other vibe she might like is Campbell. That Campbell area is really fun too.
That's true. You know what? And she also might want to be a banana slug at some
Oh,
point too. So
there
we
you
have to
go.
check out Santa Cruz. She might dig that. But yeah.
I think I told you this, but when Brian was about to go into his freshman year of college, he went to, I forget what schools he went to with his mom, but I took him to San Jose State,
Mm.
and he was like, this is cool, but I'm good. And I was like, yeah, I figured, because he had already gone to Arizona to see what Arizona was like,
Yeah.
and he'd already liked it. I think he just did it just so that I could go back on campus. And I, because I hadn't been back on campus in a long time, but it's good old San Jose State.
Oh
There's some
yeah.
memories there, some nice memories.
There's a lot of good memories at that place. I had a blast. I hated high school. Was not a high school guy.
Yeah.
And then I went to West Valley Junior College. Then I went up to Butte Junior College up near Chico. And then when I got home and really figured out what it was that I wanted to do, and then I started going to San Jose State, I fell in love with school. So if that's not a ringing endorsement for San Jose State, I don't know what is. But that's kind of what got me interested in school, was the whole San Jose State vibe and the radio station, and just all the people. You can't beat the diversity of San Jose and the Bay Area.
Yeah.
You go to Chico, and diversity is not a thing. I don't know if it is now, but at the time it was not. So it always felt a little weird because I came from the Bay Area, went up there. Then when I got home, I felt like, okay, this is the melting pot that I grew up in.
Right,
This
right.
is, I mean, I loved it. I'm super comfortable. It makes me happy. So going back to San Jose State, I was like, okay, cool. This is where I want to be. We got
Yeah.
all walks of life. Everybody is just, on the same page, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah.
San Jose State, man, it's a landmark school for civil rights when it comes to
Absolutely.
that stuff. So yeah, I mean that's what I've always sort of been very proud about with our
Yeah.
school. All right, now.
Well, and then I met my wife. So
yeah, absolutely. Like that's the best. That's the best
you
thing ever.
that's what I keep telling her. I go, hey, we can go down there. This is where Mom and I met. And she's like, I don't really care. All right, cool.
So quickly, we'll move on. The bourbon that Brad turned me on to, the Trader Joe's bourbon,
There you go.
Coke Zero,
There you go.
and I just mixed it together. And my wife says, "Oh, I thought you would have tried the new Scotch," and I was like, "No, it's still too warm." And so if
Yeah.
I'm in this office and I have to shut the door and I'm drinking the scotch, I'm just going to get so warm. So
Yeah. You're
I
going to
may,
need Christmas music with that.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, okay. Now, what we were going to talk about as our main topic tonight, which is Gabe Kapler. I think we, as a human being, we really like this guy.
yeah.
He is a stand-up dude. He stands up for stuff that we stand up for, and he does it on a big stage because obviously he's a Major League Baseball manager. And I really like that about him. And I think for the most part, being a former player, he was a former top prospect. Maybe he didn't become the superstar that people thought that he was going to be, but he's the goods, right? Like he's proven he's a baseball guy, and he has really gone through the organizations. Like he didn't just get hired, he didn't just get hired to manage. Like he was the director of the farm system, and then he was coached, and stuff. So or managed, and now he's with the Giants after a stay with Philadelphia. And the question, I'm starting to see this a lot with Kyle Shanahan too, by the way. The question is he the right guy to take your team to the next level? 2 years ago, the Giants had a fantastic regular season, and because of the wackiness of the playoffs, they lose in the first round to the Dodgers, where it's like, if this were sort of fair, you don't pit the two best teams in the National League against each other, and the Dodgers were literally one run better than the Giants in Game 5. So now we fast forward. Last year, they're a 500 team. This year, they're maybe playing above their weight a little bit, and now it's starting to bite them a little bit, and they're coming back down to earth. But they're still several games over 500, like we just said. They're in the wild card race, a game and a half out. What kicked them to the 4th spot is the Diamondbacks won 8 out of their last 10 or whatever it was. Diamondbacks actually played really good baseball. So the Giants on the flip side are not. They're losing 2 out of every 3 games. So the question now becomes, is Kapler the right manager for this organization? Is there something that he is not doing that is to blame for the bland baseball that we've seen of late? And this question is very hard for me. And you and I had this conversation the other day, and I kind of tie him and Farhan together just because of the way that the operations works. And I'm not sure if one is more, I sort of feel like if Kapler's going down with the ship, Zadie is like tied to his foot. Like that's kind of how I see their partnership. But you were saying that maybe Zadie is the one who's spared and they find another manager. And my thought on that was, well, that manager is going to probably be a lot like Kapler because of the way that this whole thing works. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of get your thoughts out about Kapler, the job that he's done, if he is the right guy, if he's not the right guy, where do we turn, all that stuff.
Yeah. And so it's 2023. What do you see on the road a lot? You see a lot of hybrids. So that, I mean, I think we can kind of move maybe towards a hybrid type of manager. And again, this is if Kapler's not it. But then Kapler surprises us. In the interview last night during the game with ESPN, they ask him, when is Tristan Beck coming out? How many innings did you have him slated for tonight? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, he's pitching really well. So after each inning, we're just going to talk to him, see where he's at. If he feels good and he's still going well, or just run him back out there. And I thought, that's not how we do things. Usually things for us are pretty well scripted, and you kind of have an idea of how things are going to go. So it is refreshing then at that point to know that, okay, Kapler is more of a hybrid manager than we give him credit for, I think. I see a lot of times on Twitter, it's, this has already been decided. This game is already, this is how it's going to go. This guy's going to pitch here. when a right-hander comes in, these batters are going to come in. But we've seen over the last couple of weeks, he said, well, Meckler, I left him in because of this. And, I took this guy out because of this. So I can't give specific examples, but when you look at that, you're thinking, okay, that's great. So now we're starting to kind of go a little bit more with a feel thing. Then you start to look and you say, well, is it personnel? Are we having personnel issues? Are we having a hard time attracting some of the players that we want to have play in San Francisco? What's it going to take to do that? It's going to take winning. We were in pursuit of Judge. We were in pursuit of Correa. Didn't get either of those guys, but Judge's script was written. He was going back to New York. Correa's was a total, a total something that's just not going to happen normally. If it weren't for just one doctor thinking this thing, I think Correa's in a Giants uniform. Unfortunately hitting 225 with 13 home runs. We can combine other shortstops to hit 225 with 13 home runs.
Yes.
Paul DeYoung comes to mind. I think we can figure that one out. But I'd hate to see Kapler go, because I kind of feel like at times, like a game like yesterday, that Sunday game, that ESPN game, I see that and I think, man, okay, he can take the type of talent that we have on this team, all of those young guys, he can put them together. He can have a guy like Tyro on the team, and Tyro decides it's my turn to speak. I'm going to say some things. Kapler lets him go, says, hey, go for it. And then you see the team respond. So then you think, okay, now are we building something? 107 wins. 81 wins. What are we going to have this year? Hopefully more than 81 wins. Continue to build a starting rotation, continue to build a lineup with some players that can play every day, instead of always having, when you're platooning, when you're looking at your lineup and you can platoon anywhere from 1 to 9 guys in your lineup, to me, I have a hard time with that, with thinking that we can maintain that successfully. I would love to have 3 or 4 players in the lineup who play pretty much every single day, and then platoon the rest of the lineup and kind of move parts around. I think that could be more successful. Looking at Tampa Bay, something like that, like an Arozarena that you could run out there every single day. Guy who injects life into your lineup, can hit both lefties and righties, and is just, a very awesome dude to have in your lineup. We're going to have 2 or 3 of those types of players in your lineup, maybe even 4 going forward. I think Kapler stays around. I think Zadie stays around. Is he on the hot seat? I'd say no at this point, because again, they're still fighting for a playoff spot. If they make the playoffs, he's bought himself at least another year. If they just miss the playoffs, I think he's still around next year, because again, he's starting to build a bond with this younger lineup, and then you add parts to that younger lineup. Now, are all of these young guys going to stick around? Are they all going to be in the lineup next year? No, definitely not, because they're, keyword young. We got some 20-year-olds. We got some 21-year-olds. We got some kids that could use some more seasoning in AAA. But to have them in AAA for when you do have those injuries, or you have somebody underperforming, or you make a trade and you want to bring somebody up, to have that's a luxury. And I think that's what Zadie is building. I like it. I hate to always be so positive, because the team is playing like garbage most of the time the past month, but you kind of have to, when you look at your team from the outside, so many other things going on in life. I could look at them and say, this is terrible. I'm not going to watch this anymore. This is garbage. No, I want to watch the games. I'm excited for tonight's game. Kyle Harrison. He's on the mound. If they lose, they lose. But if he goes out there and throws 5 innings and gives up 3 runs, but strikes out 8 or 9, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the future. And to have that stability in Zadie and Kapler there, I think it's really important.
The thing that is very interesting, and I can compare it, and the reason I mentioned Kyle Shanahan is because 49er people, media say that John Lynch is the general manager, but Kyle Shanahan is really the one who makes, a lot of the decisions about the roster.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of tied together. And if someone is to get a lot of the praise, it should be Kyle. And if someone is to get a lot of the blame, it should be Kyle. And there's this belief that, by having Kyle so close to the team, that his inability to sort of be able to step back, which is kind of John Lynch's job, may affect some of his decision-making. Kapler and Zadie, I think, are, while they're sort of connected in the same way, I'm sure they have discussions, but it seems clear to me that Zadie is like the final answer on, the decisions and such. But I'm sure it's a multi-pronged process, Patilla and Kapler. I'm sure they all have a certain say. But if Zadie is the one who should be getting the credit or the negativity about these decisions, I do think Kapler's getting a little bit too much of the blame.
Yeah,
obviously Farhan he's not out there as the public face. Kapler is the public face. So that's probably why, right? But we talked about this all offseason long, which is they fail and fail and fail to get the big name. And now if you hit on Judge, great, because Judge is still good. They kind of lucked out by not hitting on Correa, right?
Yeah.
Because, that would have been not so good to have him in for all of those years.
Well, and plus, because if you give him that money, you have to play him every day. You can't give him all of that money and then platoon him.
Yeah.
Because you would get roasted in the media and the fans would revolt. It would be insane.
I mean, just with the numbers that he has throughout the injuries and all that stuff, I mean, his season is still better than Crawford. So they would actually be
for sure
a positive at shortstop. But I guess my point is that Kapler is he is running the playbook that the organization has set.
Yeah.
And if Farhan was able to get better players, that playbook runs a lot more smoothly. When you have so many players where it's dependent on the arm that the pitcher is throwing, and we've talked about this was my real frustration with the roster this year, which is the predictability in all of these injuries. These injuries that are happening, to me, these are not surprises. You just have a bunch of old guys and guys who are predictably getting injured, which, maybe it's still part of this playbook, which part of what they're doing is like, look, we know that we have a roster which guys will get injured, but the way that we created this 40-man, we'll be able to plug in and it'll still be fine. And for the most part, it is. They're kind of in the race still. But when you don't grab that big whale or whales, like you mentioned, there is no Arozarena on this team. And and it's kind of hard for me to talk about this because we just saw the Braves come in. Like if you have Acuna and Olsen, it's an absolutely different team. The Giants don't have an Acuna or an Olsen to, be, and if you did, then we're talking about a different, we're talking about a team that's probably competing with the Dodgers for first place. So
yeah,
I guess I still believe that Kapler gets a little bit too much of the blame. Farhan skates a little bit underneath a little bit because he's not the face of the team. If you make a move, and this may not even be doable, where is it possible to even lose both guys and maybe Patilla slides in and you have an idea of a guy who's manager who could be exactly what he would like. I just think that they're sort of a package deal. And if you let one go and you don't let the other go, you're kind of laying the blame. And I think the ultimate blame needs to be laid on the guy who's making the roster decisions. And that is not to say that I think Farhan should be gone either. I like a lot of the stuff that he does, but he is also the guy who wasn't able to get Harper, wasn't able to get Judge, wasn't able to get Correa for reasons, but that's kind of what his resume is. And we are living off of this 2021 season in which they played such great baseball. And I think that's that there is something to that. They should get some credit for that season, but these last two seasons are probably a little bit closer to what the rosters are that they had. That's the way that they're playing these last two seasons is probably a little bit closer to what the value of that, I think.
So I've got a question, and it's going to be a tough one because you and I are more level-headed, I think. We're
not hot take artists.
No, we're not hot take artists. We're more level-headed. We think things through because again, we've been with this team for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
So we know that we are going to be fans next year, no matter what. We're not angry. We're not, calling for somebody's head or anything like that. But let me throw a scenario out to you to see what your reaction might be if this happened at the end of the season. Okay, 10 games left in the season. Giants are one game out of a wild card spot, and they're even 500. 10 games left. They lose 10 in a row to close out the season and totally blow that last wild card spot.
Yeah.
What would your reaction be in a situation like that after having an 81-81 season and then missing the playoffs when you were so close, but then just went up in a ball of flames at the end of the season?
It's so funny that you mentioned that because the team that I was comparing this to is the 2018 Giants. Right. Because the 2018 Giants, they hung around 500, a little bit over 500, within a couple of games of the wild card.
And that was before that extra wild card too.
Yeah. And
I think there were only 2 spots.
And then in September, they just died. And ultimately, when you look at that team, you go, oh, that was just not a good baseball team. But for 75% of that season, they were kind of like this team, a few games over 500, competing, not great. Obviously, it was going to be a lot of luck involved for them to compete against some of the better teams. But that's kind of when I was digging through, because I was in the back of my mind, that 2018 team was like absolute dog crap. And then I was like, you know what?
They weren't that bad.
There was, my memory is more so the end of the season rather than for the majority of that season. And the majority of that season is they were kind of like, this year and last year. So unfortunately, because that's how our brains work, I think if they did lose 10 in a row to end the season, they would actually be looked at as a bad team. And the only reason why I wouldn't think so is because I just looked up that 2018 team and was like, okay, like this isn't that much different from what we're dealing with. They just had a bad end. But the key is to not have that terrible ending, right? Like they have to find a way to compete for the entire season. They cannot you cannot compete for 80% of the season and then for 20% of the season you're just not good. Like that just doesn't get it done in a 162 game season. So I think they do have to play this thing out and be close for this season to not be seen as an absolute and uttermost failure.
But you wouldn't be calling for for Kapler's head, for Zadie's head, if that happened.
Me, probably not. But I could see the mainstream media absolutely calling for their heads.
Yes. I'm in the same boat as you, where I would say, I want one more year. I want one more year. I want to see what we do in this off season, because again, you call for Kapler's head and they fire Kapler. Zaidi, like you had just said, we just had this conversation. Zaidi is still making the calls.
Yeah.
He is still in free agency making the moves. So that doesn't change. He's still building a roster of platoon players. We're trying to get a name or two and trying to mix in youth. That's still what he's trying to do. And at the same time, still trying to build the farm system. So you're not going to see a massive trade to go out and get a big name player because he doesn't want to sell the farm. So you're not going to see that either. So that's why I'm also not calling for Kapler's head at that point, because I want to see next year, what can you do with another Zaidi roster? Can you build off of that by adding the youth? Let's give reference to the 2018 season.
And look, that, I think my memory, like even when I looked back, they were a little bit over, they were a little bit over 500 for about 70% of the season, and then the last 30% they just died.
No, you're pretty much dead on. August 31st. Does that sound familiar? That's in 3 days.
Yeah.
August 31st, they were 68-68. Then they lost 11 in a row. And then so on September 12th, now they're 68-79.
Yeah.
And at that point, play well under 500 and finish 73-89. 18 games out of 500. Or 18 games out of first place. So there were 6.5 games out of first place on August 31st. And then after that, just totally went downhill.
Yeah. So, okay. So here's another kind of big thing, which is the free agent market for this offseason. It is like a 2-player, 3-player, like, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna give you the names. I'm gonna give you the names. Obviously, there's one giant name, and this guy may not be a pitcher. Like, some teams may just be like, dude, you're not pitching. Yeah. Shohei Ohtani, right? He just hurt his arm again.
He may not pitch next year.
And he's still just hitting bombs like left and right. He's the best player since Barry Bonds to me.
Yeah.
Marcus Stroman, who we kind of wanted the Giants to trade for. He is going to be a free agent. Javier Baez, who I would say has been a bit of a disappointment in Detroit, wouldn't you say?
We don't need another infielder.
So he may not opt out. Maybe he will.
And we don't need another infielder who swings at everything.
Right.
We've already got that.
Just other players who I'm just looking at this list. Clayton Kershaw is going to be a free agent again. Jock Peterson's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Conforto, he's got the player option. We're probably on the hook for this dude again. But basically what I'm saying
Sean
is,
Manaea, Ross Stripling.
Right. Bellinger's literally the only guy under 30 except for Ohtani on this list. And we know about, his inconsistencies. So
true, but I think he is having a fantastic resurgent season.
Yes.
So I think other than Shohei, he's going to be the guy who gets like a 5 or 6 year deal, maybe even a 7-year deal after this.
Yes. But my point is that if your thought is like, well, the Giants may not get Shohei,
right,
but they're going to be aggressive and get whomever the next player is. There is no next player.
Right.
So what we know about when it comes to how Zaidi builds this roster, the way that he builds a roster may actually play into what it may be really good for them this offseason, because they're going to find guys who other teams may stay away from for X, Y, and Z, and the Giants may find good positions for these guys. And so I think this is one of those years where having Zaidi and the way that he puts together a roster may actually be beneficial, because the fact that it's really like Shohei, and then I don't even know who would be the number 2 player in this free agent market. So this may not be the year to get rid of the current crew that we have.
Yeah. And the other thing too, is I think if you're wooing Shohei, you're wooing him under the understanding that this is the way we do things in San Francisco. This is the roster we build. This is the way we play the game. We like platoons. You're going to pitch every 7th day, which I think he would want anyways, 6th or 7th day, which I think was attractive to him in the first place, when he was deciding between San Francisco and Anaheim. He wanted a large rotation where he could throw every 6th or 7th day. So if you get Shohei, I think at that point you're kind of committed to Kapler and Zadie for at least a few more years. I would love to see Shohei offered a deal of like, here's 10 years, super front loaded, right? Super front loaded, where he's making like 30 million a year, maybe for the first 3 years. So he can get 90 million after 3 years, or even more than that. I don't know, 40 million, 120 million after 3 years, and then an opt out. With major incentives for pitching. You throw this many innings, then we tack on an extra 10 million or whatever it is. But I think they're going to really kind of front load that deal quite a bit. But
hey, let's give him the Bobby Bonilla deal. There you go, Giants
man.
Can pay him until 2060. I'm all good with
I
that.
like that. Have it end in my lifetime, because I do want to get I do want to get some like Shohei Day. Hey, it's Shohei Day t-shirts, like
it rhymes. That's perfect. Okay, so last question, and we'll make this one short because we're already at our hour mark here.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes before Kyle Harrison takes the mound, too.
I know. We got to get out of here so we can watch. Camilo Duvall.
Yeah.
He hit a tough spot in the last 4 games. He had 4 blown saves in a row. And then yesterday, he finished the game, struck out 2. Giants were up 3, so it wasn't that pressured of a situation.
Yeah.
And he closed that game out. I don't know, obviously, the psychology of it. Like, I don't get to talk to him and how he feels. But because of the fact that the Giants play so many close games, that brother has been in some high leverage pressure situations. And it seems like, he just went through a bad stretch. He was still hitting 97, 98 on the gun, but he also had to pitch a lot of late. So I hope the Giants can get him a little bit of distance and maybe help him freshen up a bit. But then we just said it's 32 games left. It's a sprint to the finish. You need him. What is your gauge on the Duvall issues? And do you think this is going to be an issue for the rest of the season?
I don't think so. I think of the 4, we saw of the 4 blown saves, the first 2, he came in he had runners on, right? And he ended up, runner stole third. I think Acuna stole third base and Bailey threw it into left field. And then the runner scored, and then that tied up the game. So that was a blown save right there. Another one, he came in with a runner on, gave up that weak little grounder to Crawford, who didn't eat it, threw over to first, run scored. It's kind of fluke stuff. The other 2 were straight up blown saves, especially the one to Bryce Harper. But then he comes in yesterday, Sunday night. Out there dealing, throwing strikes, hitting the target. That was the key, was hitting the target. He wasn't just throwing so hard that everybody was swinging at whatever he was throwing. He was hitting the target. And so I think that's the key. Sometimes, I don't know. I love Tranquilo. I love his chill attitude. But sometimes when you're a closer, you got to be Brian Wilson. You got to be Rob Nen. You got to have some attitude, man. You can't just sit back and say, whatever. It's all good. Whatever happens, happens. You got
and it was so funny. Man. It's so funny that you say that, because remember, and this would have been, was this last year when he threw his glove down? Remember when he was not Tranquilo?
Yeah. I think that was earlier this year, wasn't it?
Is it the early this year or last year? But when he did get mad, and then he's obviously some of this is that's just his personality, and it's been good for him.
Oh yeah, but, well he owns horses, right? So he's just a chill dude,
and we saw horses. The All-Star game. him
Yeah.
against Julio Rodriguez. It was like
Phenomenal.
it was like, I'm gonna throw as hard as I can. You swing as hard as you can, and let's see what
Yeah.
happens. That was awesome.
If of the roster, you look at all the pitchers we have on this roster. If we're in a game, let's say game 162, we have to win game 162 to get into the playoffs, and we have a 1-run lead, and we're at home, and you stick him out there, even on the road, you stick him out there. I have more faith in him than I do anybody else in our line in our pitching staff. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. I would say that maybe the plan gets stretched out a little bit so that he doesn't have to come in with 1 out in the 8th inning, and
Right.
maybe you make situationally, you set it up so you don't have to deal with that moment. I think they could do that a little bit better because he has pitched a lot this year. He throws really hard. He there's a lot of things have to go right in his delivery for. He's a little like Lincecum in that way, where sometimes the ball doesn't go exactly where he wants, but it plays
Right.
into his. It's good for him. So, I would just let's manage this bullpen a little bit more closely and just not rely on him to save our rear ends if need be. So that's my only advice.
Let's not run him out there 5 days a week.
Yeah, totally.
Anything but that.
All right, it is Harrison night.
Hey,
for those of you watching, hopefully you turn it on to see Harrison. Let's hope for a good game for him. For those listening on the podcast, thanks for checking it out. We know that we're late here, but hopefully we're crossing our fingers that it was a good game. But we'll be back next week, though. Next week is Labor Day, so maybe.
Oh, right.
I don't know what your day. Maybe we push next week a day later for this podcast.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll keep you in the loop. And we'll be back next week. For Brad, I'm Double GC. When we see you, peace out.
Peace.